right into this Tom Haberstroh story. So Tom Haberstroh claimed that he did some research on MJ's iconic 87-88 season, where he became the first player to ever win the scoring title and defensive player of the year in the same season. And he went back and did some deep dive statistical analysis, right, and film analysis of this season, as much as he could have, because he said they don't have obviously all the games available from way back then. And he found discrepancies in the actual stats that were given for MJ that year, and in the actual, like you said, breakdown analysis that he himself analyzed in the film study, and looking at the different box scores and comparing the box scores and the scorekeepers' notes. He did a lot of research here. So here's what he found. He said there's considerable evidence, both statistically and with corroborating video, that suggests that MJ's Defensive Player of the Year award may not have been as valid as folks thought at the time. Now, he goes into a kind of deep dive here, but essentially here's the gist of it. In 1986-87, MJ's third season in the league, he was upset, publicly making it known that he believes he's being disrespected because he was left off the all-defensive team, even though he became the first player in NBA history to register at least 200 steals and 100 blocks in the same season. So he was irritated. And he was letting the media know about this, and he brought it up several times, even like a Sports Illustrated article. He said, Michael Cooper is great at ball denial, but check his other stats. This league gives defensive awards on reputation. It just teased me off. And so then they fast forward to the 87-88 season, which is the epic season where he wins scoring title and defensive player of the year. And basically here it said by the end of that season, he led the league with 259 steals. That topped the leaderboard. He also led all guards with 131 blocks. The next highest total for a guard was, I think, Alvin Robertson of San Antonio with 69. He had 131 blocks that year. At the end of the season, he was credited on average with 3.2 steals per game, 1.6 blocks per game. Of course, those kind of eye-popping numbers will get you Defensive Player of the Year. And it was his first Defensive Player of the Year award. And for almost 4 decades, nobody's been able, guard like that has been able to win Defensive Player of the Year. It's a big man award for the most part. You're definitely not going to win a scoring title and Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. Obviously talking about how rare that feat was. So Alex Rucker, remember this name because he's a former NBA stat keeper. He's currently the CEO of a boys and girls club actually in Texas. So I'm sure probably try to get on the show if you want to. But he was once a top executive with the 76ers in 2020. Before that, he was a former stat keeper with the Vancouver Grizzlies. And he was an employee during their inaugural season 95-96. In February, Rucker told Tom Haberstroh that he was among a number of home scorekeepers in the 90s. So they would basically, for home games, they would chart all the stats and everything. And he also told, is a great podcast called Pablo Torre Finds Out. And you probably have seen it, Patrick. They do a lot of NBA stuff. And there was an interview with this guy, Rucker, and he explained that in his view, inflating certain box score statistics for the home team was actually common practice in the 90s.
It was common practice for a long time.
So, all right, so there you go. And he says
the stories about Will Chamberlain there is lots of people that talk about those, and they're like, no, there's just no video evidence of it. But a lot of those are not true.
Yeah, so he said that he actually wanted to approach this position with as much integrity and honesty as possible and accuracy as possible. But he said he was influenced by other older veteran scorekeepers. According to Rucker, the scorekeepers told him in no uncertain terms that basically if you see something that looks like an assist and it's John Stockton to Karl Malone, it's an assist. Rucker soon realizes what was expected. In Rucker's view, it was inferred that part of the scorekeeper's job was to give hometown stars star treatment. He said, I left there clearly understanding that, yes, we are supposed to present the most accurate representation that we can, but the NBA is also an entertainment business. And he said, it's up to us in very small part as the statisticians to support or reinforce stars and excitement and fun. And that message was definitely reinforced internally within the Grizzlies, he said. So accordingly, he started, fudging the stats a little bit. Like if it was a half a block, it's a full block.
Yeah.
Or if it, a guy just tipped a pass and then it can't, you know what, that's a steal. Pass, that's a steal. We're gonna count that. And it's just it's just a little fudging of the stats, little by little, but that adds up over an 82 game season. So basically you have someone who is on the record saying, yes, we did in the 80s or in the 90s, excuse me. We did give star players star treatment when it came to stats. And how about this? So we said it wasn't just the Vancouver Grizzlies, and because of these home scorekeepers, home stats were a lot more inflated than road stats. And that's kind of where this whole thing starts. And it says league-wide in the 80s and 90s, in the 80s, home teams annually registered about 800 more blocks and about 450 more steals than the road team league-wide. That's per Basketball Reference. It said over time, those disparities begin to even out in the Adam Silver era, which is the technically advanced era they were in, technologically advanced era they were in. He said that the Homer effect on blocks and steals has almost disappeared. Just 135 more blocks at home than on the road, and a measly 13 more steals league-wide at home than on the road. So this is something that was obviously more prevalent in the 90s as opposed to current day. So it says, so according to a league office, it says here, the NBA has used modern technology to apply real-time auditing of stats now, so they don't worry about that. That's since 2018. And this brings us to the MJ era and back to that 1987-88 season. And it says, breaking out the numbers, it says they found that Jordan averaged a mind-boggling 4 steals and 2.1 blocks at home during that season. But on the road, those numbers shrunk from 4 steals to 2.1 steals, and from 2.1 blocks at home to 1.2 blocks. You're almost cutting them in half. And it said, put simply, Jordan steals and blocks nearly doubled at home compared to on the road. If they looked at it from a per 36-minute angle and looked at it from that prism, it said Jordan's combined blocks and steals stocks were a whopping 82% higher at home than on the road. And it also points out here that dating back to the 82-83 season, when the award was actually established, Defensive Player of the Year award, Jordan's home versus away disparity in combined blocks and steals represents the largest disparity of any Defensive Player of the Year award in NBA history for that 87-88 season. No other instance in the award's history has a player shown a disparity that touched 160%, except for Jordan's 87-88 season, which clocked 182% disparity. And according to stathead.com, Jordan posted 165 steals at home, by far the most in the NBA, compared to just 94 on the road. That was tied for fourth. The gap of 71 steals blew away the competition, with the next largest gap among the top 15 league leaders in steals being 47. And so Jordan finished with the most steals at 259, past Alvin Robinson of the Spurs at 243. So if you don't give Jordan them extra steals, he doesn't win a Defensive Player of the Year. It probably goes to Alvin Robinson. And another stat, it says Jordan's 84 blocks at home. It ranked 8th most in the league, a highly unusual place to find a guard. On the road, though, his total of 47 blocks fell all the way down to 20, or tied for 21st, which is usually where you find guards in terms of where they're ranked statistically in the blocks category. I mean, it's just pretty damning and very thorough, Patrick, when it talks about it. It also says that approximately 30% of Jordan's steals and blocks from that 87-88 season, if you're obviously tracking them by today's accuracy standards, is that 30% of his steals and blocks would disappear from the record. Gone.
Yeah.
Period. Wow. Mind blowing.
No, it is. It's not hugely surprising. It's surprising the numbers they did it, but it's one of those things of, during that era, you have to remember, because I remember I was watching games back then. Not every game was on. I know they were on WGN, so they had more games on TV than others, but this is also in the 80s before they became the 90s Bulls and were winning championships and were really on all the time because they were a dynasty at that point. This is before they've won a title.
Yeah, you're right.
And so this is pre-dynasty Bulls. This is, a Bulls team that was probably on TV some, but even if you're on TV, there isn't a box score that keeps popping up on the TV because they don't have the necessarily people that are doing that. And then they just even pop the score and the timer up, a couple times during a segment. Right. Yeah, so you don't even see that. So what you would do is you go to the newspaper the next day and you would look up the box scores in the newspaper the next day. There wasn't the internet, so you couldn't keep along real time with the stats. So you didn't know. You couldn't watch real time and go, he's already had 6 steals? It's the first quarter. How's he already got 6 steals?
Yeah.
So there wasn't
Seriously.
any of that full-time stats that there is now where everything's tracked by time more and everything. You just, they would mark stuff off. So it was a lot easier to cheat it than it is now, because now everything is done by 6 different statisticians. It's done on a computer screen that we can all see at the same time. So if something pops up that doesn't look right, you immediately know it doesn't look right. And you go, why'd they credit him with that rebound? Like, he didn't get that rebound. Why'd they credit him with it? And you'll see it as in real time. It'll just pop up. So there's more of that kind of the game. So it makes sense. And again, Michael wasn't the only guy doing this, but this is when we get into the Jordan, LeBron, and that, Jordan would never do what LeBron does and go out and pull for himself and push. He did, but Jordan had a lot of other people that did it for him because social media wasn't a thing. So he couldn't go online and clips didn't go viral.
There's a story about how Jordan's close to like the stat keeper from the Bulls, and he literally would go over to him game by game, like, "Hey, am I close to that record? What's going on, man?" Like, so he had a close relationship with that guy.
But
too,
it's also like, who is Jordan really close friends with? Ahmad Rashad, who is one of the biggest voices of that period of NBA knowledge, telling everybody. And so if Ahmad Rashad came on every day and told you that Michael Jordan's the greatest and here's what the greatest doing, you believe him. So Ahmad Rashad, I loved watching him when I was growing up. So I get that concept of that he didn't do it, but he did. He just did it, a lot of it behind the scenes. He had a lot of people fighting for him behind the scenes because they understood that, if you make a star, everybody's happy. The team makes more money, everybody's happier on the team, and Michael Jordan's happier, stars happier. So it's always been that way. Ultra competitive people are going to want to win everything. And it just so happens that LeBron lives in an era where he can come off really, really poorly. And I agree, he comes off really, really poorly a lot. That when he's saying, I deserve this and I should have done that and this should be mine. I get that. Or I don't get respect. And go, everyone respects you. But Michael was the same way. They're more similar in that sense than people ever seem to think they are. People seem to think one of them is altruistic and great and never is so humble, and the other one isn't. Or one of them is maybe not humble, but is deservedly should be allowed to be this loudmouth. And it blows my mind every time when people get on one side or the other. They're both just really, really great players, and it's great that I've been able to watch both of them play. I've seen both of them play live multiple times. I've covered both of them before. That's awesome to me, and so I find it always a positive thing. But this article it's fun in the fact of poking holes into these worlds of guys. Don't over glorify the past at some points. Sometimes these things were a little bit more inflated than you may want them to believe. And as much as we can say they were inflated for Jordan, they just went over the top with it. But again, Alvin Robertson probably had some favorable numbers at home as well. So so
it probably evens out in the end because everybody was doing it.
It doesn't even out.
It's like the steroid era.
Exactly. I don't think it evens out. I think it gets way closer. So I bet that Alvin Robinson's numbers were up, not 180% or 60. What did you say? 82% or something like that. Inflated at home. His numbers were probably inflated 30, 40% at home. So
he wasn't MJ status star. Yeah. He was just
they were inflated. So at the end of the day, it's not like it was it's like a lot of things in sports. They were cheating, so was everybody else. And it didn't actually affect the game, it just affected the awards. So at the end of the day, who really cares that much about it? I get the who didn't win the awards, but it didn't affect the integrity of the game. So it's the best kind of cheating.
That's true. You're right. That's a good point about that. I agree with that. And I think more so what it's affecting is now in retrospect, decades later, is this ongoing discussion we've had about MJ as the GOAT. And now that now you finally have somebody who can even be respected enough to be in the conversation, to have a debate about who's the GOAT. This now will affect that conversation, that narrative, that discourse happening, which I think has been happening for the last 8 years now. We've been talking about MJ and LeBron. And to your point about how everybody was doing it, this was also a debate. It says in his article, basically Wilt Chamberlain's fan club and Wilt Chamberlain's people and Bill Russell's fan club and his people, they were actually debating this back in the day. Because they claimed that Bill Russell and both Wilt Chamberlain were benefiting from inflated home numbers. It says here that they traded accusations that the opposing scorekeeper padded the stats to help their big men. Looking back, the numbers are indeed startling. Between them, Russell and Chamberlain registered 26 games with 40-plus rebounds. None of the 26 games were tabulated on the road. None of them. They were all at home when they got these 40-plus rebound games. They were all at home. And it said it also went on to talk about Nick Van Exel. Some other examples, like Nick Van Exel apparently had that 23 assist game. And they broke it down and looked at it. And I believe one of the data scientists said Nick Van Exel shouldn't have had more than 17 assists. You can make an argument for him deserving only 15 assists. But they had him down as that epic 23 assist game. Now, these are games you can watch on YouTube and actually now track them yourself. And he also pointed out Shaq's 15 block game of 1993 probably should have been more like 10 blocks. He broke down Toronto Raptors record-breaking 23 block night of 2001. They said it should have been more like 17.
Yeah. I also, none of these guys thought games would be readily available to watch over and over again. At the time, it was like, no, it's airing, and that's
done.
It's done.
Nobody will ever watch it again.
It's done. No one's ever going to watch this again. No, I get it.
It's like,
it just goes, don't idolize celebrities, don't idolize athletes, don't idolize politicians as infallible and deities. Everyone's going to have their issues. So when you get on and idolize it, I love the game of basketball. That's why I'll enjoy watching MJ games. I'll enjoy watching LeBron games. Once you get into the someone has to be better and the idolization and the statistical review of it all, that's where it loses some of the fun for me. Stats are a fun thing to look at, but when you're judging a player, I'm always been much more of an eye test guy and a what you watch. And so I think stats are great for that, but you understand that stats a lot of times can come with other things. And it's fun to see that somebody has gone through the effort to point it out now and show you. And if it was happening for MJ, it's probably happening with a lot of other people. So you just have to take it all with a grain of salt and understand it. It is what it is.
The NBA is so blatant, and they basically don't give a damn about this or the accuracy of these statistics. They still have a MJ Michael Jordan 10 steal, like a 10 steal highlight video. He had a 10 steals in a game. They still have that highlight video like up on their website. And on the comments, there are several people who've already tracked and said, dude, they only count 6 steals. There are not 10 steals in this game by MJ, and yet you guys literally have it up there as a 10 steal game. So it is one of those things where, truth sometimes is stranger than fiction. In this case, it is, because the truth is that they inflated these numbers because they wanted a superstar like Michael Jordan to be crowned a little bit earlier. It was going to happen anyway for MJ, but I think they just wanted it to happen right then and there, right after that 86, 87 season. And we know David Stern was all about, hey, the star power is going to drive our sports. And they found here, I think, like you saying, Patrick, it's also that great, it reminds me of that great saying, hope I get it right, hope I don't butcher it, from, I believe it was the man who shot Liberty Vance, is the old Western, where they say, when legend becomes fact, print the legend.
Yeah.
The legend's always more interesting. The legend's always better. And when the legend becomes fact, just print the legend. And that's essentially what we're watching here.
And I'll say this, someone texts you can't inflate points. You could before there was video, and high school students still do it constantly. So you can very much. You can inflate anything if there's no video evidence. Anything's honesty. Hey, that's the way it is, man. Anything's the truth if you say it is. So it still happens. Go look up, and I guarantee if you go on certain high schools' pages of what their team did, and you tabulate how many points everybody says they averages, you'd be like, you're scoring 170 a game? Y'all's team was scoring 170 a game. Something tells me some of y'all are lying.
Some of y'all are. That's a great point too. Yeah, high school stats happens all the time, just because they're trying to get these guys some recognition, and they're trying to get them scholarships and stuff. So
35,000 rushing yards last year. Come on, man.
That's a great point there. You're right about that. I've thought about that, but you're right. It's probably still happening, just at the lower level.
It's not on video. Then who cares? At the end of the day, they'll just say, this was when it really happened.
Yeah. No, it's just, like I said, it's good because it adds to, I think, more about the discussion, discourse we've had about MJ and LeBron. Matter of fact, LeBron talked about this. We'll play that sound later. But LeBron talked about how, one of the goals that he's had for himself is to surpass MJ and win that Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yeah, it's too late now, man.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if he's gonna win it now, but at one point in his career, he said that was one of his goals, and
Yeah.
it never worked out for LeBron.
Nope.
Never
And
worked out for
he
him.
got a job one year, but that was also
Yeah,
because I don't think they didn't do this. They didn't, he didn't have the appeal.
yeah,
It was when he was in Miami, and I don't think Pat Riley really cared about campaigning for him. And so he had
that's true.
Spoelstra as a coach who wasn't the campaigner, didn't have the reputation, and Pat Riley didn't care about campaigning for him because Pat Riley is not a personal awards guy.
No
So
championships.
and
Yeah,
so that was, if he was on Cavs, he probably would have won it that year. If he was on the Lakers, he would have won it that year.
good point.
He got 100% job that year. I think it was like
Okay.
12-13. Marc Gasol won.
Yeah,
Marc Gasol didn't.
and
Marc Gasol didn't deserve.
and the crazy part is, I think even people who are on the MJ side of the MJ LeBron debate will acknowledge that LeBron is a better defender in their minds.
Yeah, I
than
mean they're
MJ.
both.
Just because of just
yeah.
just because he matches up with
Yeah,
more.
he's 4
players.
inches. He's
just
like
physical freak.
Five,
Yeah,
4 inches taller than him, and
exactly.
and a physical freak. That Michael Jordan was super athletic, but not a physical freak like LeBron is.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good conversation, though. I'm glad that Tom Haberstroh threw that out there. There are some folks that still refuse to even acknowledge it and let it. And it shouldn't change your opinion about MJ. Of course, MJ is still the GOAT, but you should be willing to accept the fact that MJ's mythology has separated him from the rest of the all-time greats in the NBA, and maybe the divide shouldn't be as wide. Maybe that chasm shouldn't be as wide between MJ and the rest of the league. Because hey, maybe some of those numbers are a little bit inflated. All right, good stuff there. We come back, we'll get into